Can I do that?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Ho, there it is. Everybody say hi to Wendell. They're all waiting.
Oh,
So.
This is different.
Should I move closer?
Yeah, sure.
If you want to, yeah. Move a little closer.
This is a little different.
Yeah.
Are you a little nervous?
Well, I feel like I don't have like much of an audience, and I can't see them either. You know.
I can flip it around. Put it on my belly. Here, we'll try that. See what you think.
Man, it feels more like I'm teaching people, but is that comfortable for you?
Yeah, I'm down.
Okay.
I probably have to take it off my chest though, because
Yeah.
it'll be breathing.
Right. Keep going up and down. All right. Cool. I mean, yeah. I don't know. It's different. It's weird.
Hey, Semper Gumby. Gotta be flexible.
That's right. All right. So tonight I'm going to be doing a reframe lesson based on the last 4 weeks that we've been going through this series with Patrick called More to the Story. So what we've been looking at is kind of the ideas around sex that we get from culture and society, and how we as Christians know that there's more to the story. So we've looked at some different aspects of the Bible and God's Word to see, what does God tell us about sex? What was it designed for? What does it mean to have a healthy sex life as a Christian? And what does that look like in marriage? So for tonight, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of those ideas that we've discussed over the last couple weeks. Just looking at kind of the concept of marriage and why sex was created for marriage. Also, what does that mean for us today, whether we are or are not married? So before we get started, let me just start off with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, I'm so thankful for all the students that are able to join us tonight, both in person and virtually. Just pray that the words that I share tonight resonates with them, that sets up in their hearts and their minds and makes them think a little bit deeper about their relationship with you and how they approach sex in their own life. I just pray that as we go through this lesson, that each of these students know that they are loved and they're cared for. And even if some of these ideas might be counterculture or against what they've known to be true, I just pray that all of these things are communicated in love, and that we can grow in our relationship with you to seek absolute truth and not the truth that society and culture tries to sell us. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Hello. Welcome.
Ola made it. So, Ola, you have Mindy's number, right?
No.
You don't?
Yes, I do.
Can you text her and just let her know that I'm here, because I forgot. Tell her that I'm using my phone for
Okay.
Zoom. By the way, can y'all hear Wendell? Yeah? Okay, good.
Cool. So to start off, I have a question. So have you guys ever been asked to do something and you ask why? What's the response you get sometimes when you ask someone why? Exactly. Tim nailed it. Sometimes, whether it's your parent or a teacher, principal, they'll come back with, because I said so. Which, that can be frustrating, you know? Whether you wanted to do the thing or not, it can be kind of annoying when someone just comes back and says, because I said so. What's important is sometimes you genuinely do want to know why. I know sometimes we're in a bad attitude and we say why because we just want to fight, we want to be obstinate, we want to be difficult, and we really don't want to do the things. But sometimes it's a genuine why. Like, we want to know why they're asking that or why that's even a request. And so as we go through this lesson, I think asking why is a valid question. So when we look at the Bible and we hear in church that God wants us to wait until marriage to have sex, you can ask why. And that's what we want to dive into tonight. Yes, God says so. It is something that he says. He wants us to wait for marriage to have sex. But tonight, I want us to understand, why is that important, and why is that something that God asks of us? So, first question, kind of, what is marriage? To understand the role of sex, we also need to understand the role of marriage. When we look at TV shows and movies and culture today, marriage is not always put in a positive light. Sometimes it's made to seem like something that you avoid as long as possible, because as soon as you get married, it's game over. You're locked in, and they make it sound like there's no fun in that. So culture supports this hookup culture, one-night stands, doing whatever you want to please yourself and your body without care for the other person or care for God. And maybe even we look at people that are married in culture, and they don't seem to take it very seriously. And when I was thinking about this and preparing the lesson, I immediately remembered Kim Kardashian, and I had to look this up. I didn't remember who she married. It was Chris Humphries. They were married for 72 days. So when I was thinking about celebrities and culture, we see these really short marriages. Britney Spears was, I think, married for 3 days to a guy. And so when we look at these movie stars that are meant to be role models, they don't always put up a good example of what marriage is. They go into it lightly. Some of them even said, I got married as a joke, and got divorced 3 days later. So we see our society and culture make light of what marriage is. But marriage is not a frivolous relationship just to be entered in and out of as you care. In the Bible, in what we hear from God, marriage is a covenant relationship. And what that means is that marriage is both symbolic and substantial. Marriage means a great deal to God, and he values that, and he wants that for us in our lives. A covenant, when we look at marriage, is two people that are making binding promises to each other. And so through those promises and through that committed covenant, they become unified. So not only is marriage substantial in terms of its role in our life and what God values for it, it's also symbolic. So the covenant of marriage that we see in our lives is actually an earthly representation of the covenant between Christ and the church. And we actually see this in the Bible. In Ephesians chapter 5, it says this: "After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be unified to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church." So that eternal union of God and his people, the same love and union that he sent his son Jesus to die for us to have, that is the same love and commitment that we see in a Christ-centered marriage. And so that is what is so important about marriage, is it creates this beautiful picture of love, commitment, selflessness, trust, and it's meant to be a good and healthy thing. We don't always see healthy examples of marriage. We're surrounded by divorces. The divorce rate is about 50%. So we're surrounded by broken relationships. But that's not what God desires for us. He wants us to enter into marriage very earnestly and intentionally, knowing the weight of what we're going into. So what does a healthy marriage look like? Sex is part of a healthy marriage, but it doesn't just stop there. We know that there's more to the story. So in a relationship, it goes deeper. There needs to be connections and compatibility, shared interests, things that you like to do together, but also things that you like to do on your own. And you find those things interesting about the other person. So it's a balance of kind of opposites attract, but also what do you guys have in common? We also know that marriage and relationships aren't all butterflies and rainbows. It's going to be difficult. There are tough times in every relationship. So as much as it takes compatibility and connection, it also takes patience, grace, forgiveness. And if we did these things on our own, it would be really, really difficult to have that amount of grace and forgiveness. But we don't have to do these things alone. In Ecclesiastes, it shares this with us. In chapter 4, verse 9 through 12, it says, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." So we see here that there's strength in that union in marriage, and that the two complement each other, and you can accomplish far more than you could on your own. But the part that I think is most incredible is that last sentence, where it talks about a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. What do you guys think those 3 strands are in a marriage?
Man.
You got man, woman, and what's the third? God. So when you're in a Christ-centered marriage, God helps you overcome those obstacles and those struggles. Even when you don't feel like being patient or feel like being gracious, that's where God can step in and give you the patience and give you the spirit of forgiveness to help right the wrongs and to repair any brokenness in that relationship. So sex is part of a great marriage, but great sex can't be the only part of marriage. So you might be thinking that marriage really isn't anywhere on your radar right now. So what does all of this really have to do with you guys, you know? I think it's important to understand God's design for sex and marriage, because that can help you make better decisions in your life, both personal and dating today. So now I want to dig a little bit deeper into why is it unhealthy to have sex before marriage? So one of the first things that came to mind when I was thinking about this is that having a sexually active dating relationship can actually blind you or distract you from the reality of your relationship. So one of the big points about dating is getting to know that other person, getting to see them at their best, but also seeing them at their worst. And sometimes in dating, you start to better understand yourselves. Maybe they kind of reveal to you some of your blind spots or some of your flaws, and they actually help you become a better person, to become more self-aware. So when we're going through dating, we're looking for that person that we want to spend the rest of our lives with. We're looking for that right individual that we want to get married to. So whenever you are dating and you introduce sex into that, it can blind you to some of those realities. So it might be a toxic or an unhealthy relationship, or maybe you just are simply incompatible. But because you're sexually involved, you're gonna create those excuses of, well, she's not that bad, or he only does X, Y, and Z a little bit. Like, it's not that bad. Well, the sex is good, but he sucks about this, or she's the worst about that. It's easy to be drawn to that sense of intimacy that sex provides, even though everything else in the relationship could be totally wrong. And so that's the danger that that you introduce whenever you have sex in that dating relationship. Because I know people that have been stuck in unhealthy relationships, but they just don't see it because they're far too involved with that individual. Now, to go a little bit farther and to kind of look at this even deeper from a biblical perspective, dating relationships are not covenant relationships. And this is a big distinction that I want to bring to light. Marriage, I think today, society tries to kind of look at these two the same way of, well, I don't really plan to get married, so like, I'll date this person for as long as it lasts, and then when it's over, it's over, we'll just move on. No big deal, we were only dating. I know people that have dated for like 8-9 years. And they live together, they plan to live together, they don't want to get engaged, they don't want to get married, they're just happy dating. So it's a little bit of this limbo. So in marriage, there's that commitment because it is that covenant relationship. So because in marriage you've promised yourselves to each other, there's that responsibility on both sides to preserve that relationship. So when things get rocky and tough and there's misunderstandings, and you're mad at the other person, in marriage, you're called to seek resolution for those issues, to work through those differences and those struggles to preserve the marriage that you have. But in dating, there's no strings attached. You can call off the relationship at any moment, and you just broke up. You called it quits. It was a mutual understanding. There's so many reasons why a dating relationship can be called off. So that's the difference we see between marriage and dating, is that there isn't that covenant relationship that protects that intimacy and that commitment to one another. And sex was not meant to be in that life of uncertainty that we experience in dating. And so part of that is an illustration that I want to share with you when we think about dating and the role of sex in that. And it comes from, we actually quoted a little bit earlier, but this is the original quote, and it's later brought up in the New Testament when Paul is writing. And it says this, "Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man.' That is why a man leaves his father and mother, and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." So we talked about this earlier in that passage. It's this idea of becoming one flesh. I can get this out. There we go. All right. So here's the illustration. So whenever a man and a woman is united in sex, they become one flesh. So, you're dating someone, you have sex once, maybe it was just a one night stand, just a hookup, and you call it quits. Well, there's actually, you can see that there's a little bit of the blue on the white, and there's a little bit of the white on the blue. Like, there wasn't actually a clean separation, even just once. But, you do it twice, 3 times. You've been dating for a couple months, so pretty well involved.
It's a Windows workout.
Yeah. So, Jalen, do you wanna try to separate all the white from the blue? How's it working?
No.
Not well, is it? So that's the idea that we have here. Whenever you have sex, the two become one flesh, both literally and emotionally, spiritually, on so many levels, the two become one flesh. It even is scientific. Whenever you have sex, your body and your brain is releasing chemicals. And those chemicals and those neuroconnections is what is building that intimacy and that connection between you and the other person. And that's what's beautiful about sex within marriage, is that is the bridge between you and your spouse. That sexual intimacy and those chemicals that are released and those connections build that relationship over time. And it continues to be intimate and pure. But whenever you do that outside of marriage, and your body is releasing those chemicals and you're creating these connections to an individual that only lasts one day, you're creating connections to an individual that is not there or present any other time in your life, they don't have your back, or it's an individual that you create a connection over a long period of time, and then you break up and you separate, And so when those separations come, it's painful, it's hard, and it's difficult. So that is my caution to you guys when we're thinking about the role of sex in our lives. The choices we make today matter. So what do you do with that? What's the next step? Whether you've never had sex or you have been sexually active, this goes back to a lesson that Patrick shared with us. Any time is the right time to decide to live a life of sexual integrity. We want to get away from the idea of virginity being like the one and only way. I think a lot of times in church it was like, well, if you're a virgin, good job. If you're not, that sucks. Screwed that up. And that's not what we're trying to preach here. Like, we all have made mistakes. And even if that is in your past and you have been sexually active, you don't have to continue down that path. You can choose to be a person of sexual integrity. So I think the best steps you can take towards being a person of sexual integrity is learning how to set healthy boundaries. Now, what I think is really important as we think about boundaries, sex, relationships, and marriage, and all of these things, I'm just reminded of this idea that God is a good God. And just because you have to say no to something doesn't mean that's a bad thing. Society tries to make it seem like you can do whatever you want. In the Bible, we see everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So you can rationalize why you do what you do. You can rationalize how sexually active you are. But God doesn't want those things for you because he knows there's so much more for your life. He wants something so much better for you. And having sex outside of marriage can be extremely painful, and God does not want you to have to go down that path. He wants you to protect yourself and the person that you're going to end up with in the future. So rather than looking at boundaries as rules that you have to follow, instead, these are ways that you get to honor God with your body and with who you are. And we see that reflected in 1 Corinthians. That's Ephesians. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18. It says, "Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." So I think it's so important that as we look towards the future and kind of to take an action step, I want to explore with you guys what boundaries look like. And so this is actually, this is an illustration I learned in high school. One of my youth pastors in Kansas, we actually had like a purity retreat. It was co-ed, guys and girls, and we had times together as a group with like the general lessons. But we also had breakout sessions where the girls could be by themselves to talk about anything personal, and the guys could be together in their own group. So it's crazy to think that I learned this analogy and illustration probably 12 years ago, and I still remember it to this day. And so I really hope that this is something that sticks with you guys as you think about boundaries in your own life. So the illustration that my youth pastor shared is this idea of like a shepherd, and he's got a herd of sheep, and his pasture land just happens to be on the edge of a cliff. Now, if you guys think about even in the Bible, there's lots of illustrations about sheep. And what do sheep tend to do?
Follow.
They follow. What else do they tend to do?
Herd, stay together.
They do stay together, but what's the one parable about the 99 sheep? What happened to the one?
They fall in the holes and stuff and they're lost.
Yeah, they get lost, they wander off. Sheep are not known for being necessarily the smartest animals, and they tend to wander, get lost. So I actually Googled this when I was thinking about the lesson, because I kind of wanted to make sure I was actually like presenting a valid analogy, and it's true. Because sheep tend to wander off, they very well can fall down a cliff and not even realize what they had just done. So when we're thinking about boundaries,
Can y'all see the drawing? You guys can? Okay, let me get a little bit closer.
so when we're thinking about this shepherd, he obviously cares about his sheep, and he doesn't want them to fall down the cliff and die. So what if he puts the fence right there? What's going to happen if the sheep is a little curious? What's on the other side of the fence?
See if he can try for the 100-meter hurdles.
Yeah, he's going to hurdle that thing, and he's going to hurdle himself right down the edge of a cliff. So that wasn't a very smart place to put the fence, was it? Nah, I don't think so either. So oh goodness. So let's reconsider where we could put the fence. What if he puts the fence here? The sheep is still curious, wants to know what's over here. So one day he does it. He jumps over the fence. Then what? What could happen next?
He can still keep going.
Yeah, now he doesn't even have to hurdle anymore. He could just full on 100-meter dash right off that cliff. Done deal. Rocks, ocean. Not good for this sheep.
Yeah.
So, what the shepherd decides to do is, I didn't have to erase that. He's going to put in a series of fences. So, when the sheep jumps over the first one, is he still safe?
Yes.
Yeah. When he jumps over the second one, is he still safe?
Yes.
Yeah. And at this point, he's had to jump over 2 obstacles to try to see what's at the end. Guess what that gives him time to do?
Reconsider and say, this is not the event for me.
Exactly. Gives him an opportunity to think, maybe I really shouldn't be jumping over all these fences. And so before he gets to the edge and he goes too far and he has to own up to the consequences of his decisions, he has an opportunity to think, change his decisions, and go back to the safe pasture where the shepherd wants him to live. And so that's how I want you guys to think about boundaries. Whether it's personal boundaries with pornography or things you're consuming on the internet, or it's a personal or like a relational boundary with someone you're dating. If you know that there's something that you're trying not to do, not have sex, not look at pornography, not masturbate, anything like that, you don't want to let this fence be your only and your last boundary. When you're thinking about your boundaries, you want to have a system to where you know once you hit a point, you've had time to think about what you're about to do, and before you make that final decision, you can reconsider how you got there, and you can give yourself space and time to decide, you know what, I'm not going to go any farther. So for like a personal one, it might be putting like a content blocker on your phone, downloading an app that blocks adult content, adult websites. It could be removing or uninstalling an app that you can kind of get down a rabbit trail and end up in places consuming content that you shouldn't be consuming. So there's different ways, and maybe it's an accountability partner. that checks in with you once a week to see how you're doing. And maybe that's kind of one of those early, oh, you know what? Like, let me reconsider. They just checked in with me. Like, I'm going to have to be honest with them next week. And I want to have a clean record. I want to be able to say, yeah, I was clean this week. I didn't do anything. Maybe it's a relational boundary. So maybe you're dating someone and one of your first boundaries is, well, hey, I'm just not going to go to their house if they're the only one there. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where that temptation shows up. So maybe you avoid one-on-one just by yourself. But maybe you do end up hanging out. You are over at her house or she's at your house, and you do end up just hanging out one-on-one. So maybe one of your next boundaries is, okay, well, we're gonna just, keep the lights on, like not make it dark, just keep it light, bright. That way there's no hiding anything or intimacy there. So that's the way that I want you guys to think about boundaries. And I think it's important to maybe even write these down for yourselves, but especially if you're in a relationship, talk about those boundaries and let that person know, like, hey, like, I don't want to be involved sexually. I don't want to take that route. Here's my ground rules. Like, I don't want to hang out one-on-one. Let's not watch movies and TV shows that are explicitly or sexually explicit. Like, put up those safeguards and talk about them openly so that that person knows when they've crossed one of your boundaries. If you say, I don't want to hang out one-on-one, and they say, hey, come over to my house, my parents are here, it's fine, you get there, your parents aren't there. Well, they knew your boundary and they just broke your trust. So it's important to have those open dialogues about what your boundaries are. Even if it's a personal boundary, share those boundaries with someone else and they can help keep you accountable and make sure that you're not crossing those boundaries. And so whenever we think about God being good, this is not this sucks. I can't do anything fun. No, this is God wanting the best for you. And by setting these healthy boundaries, God can be active in your life to protect you from harm and to push you into a way that's positive in what He wants in your life. So that's what I have for you guys this week for the reframe. So
That was awesome.
Yeah,
That was good.
I hope you
Do
guys.
you guys have any, Tim or Sam, do you guys have any comments or questions or? What are you eating? Are you eating pizza?
It's a cookie.
Oh, it's a cookie. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Wendell.
You're
That
welcome.
was a great reframe, a great way to put that together. Thanks, Tim and Sam, for coming. I appreciate it. Nola and Jalen.